Sergeant First Class Nadia Patel limped toward the Black Hawk helicopter at Camp Thornfield, her orders clutched in weathered hands. The flight crew chief looked at her dismissively and shook his head. "No room, Sergeant. Manifest is full." Then Colonel Marcus Hale spotted the hidden patch on her sleeve, and everything changed in an instant. Camp Thornfield sprawled across the dusty Afghan landscape like a fortress of concrete barriers and razor wire, its helicopter landing zone constantly busy with the rhythmic thrum of rotor blades carrying personnel and supplies to forward operating bases scattered throughout the hostile terrain. The morning air was thick with dust and aviation fuel, while the distant mountains provided a stark backdrop to the organized chaos of military logistics. Black Hawks and Chinooks landed and departed with mechanical precision, their crews focused on maintaining the lifeline that connected isolated outposts to the main base's resources and command structure. Sergeant First Class Nadia Patel moved through the controlled chaos of the landing zone with the measured gait of someone whose left leg had been rebuilt with titanium and determination. At 34, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a soldier who had earned her stripes through actions rather than words, her weathered face bearing the subtle marks of someone who had spent years in combat zones where survival depended on vigilance and skill. Her uniform was regulation perfect, but showed the signs of extensive field-use fabric worn soft at stress points, boots that had walked countless miles, and equipment arranged with the practical efficiency of someone who understood that proper gear placement could mean the difference between life and death. The limp that marked her gait was barely noticeable to casual observers, but those with combat experience would recognize it as the signature of an IED encounter that had left its permanent mark. What distinguished Patel from the typical soldier was not just her obvious experience, but the way she carried herself, alert but not aggressive, confident but not arrogant, and possessed of the kind of situational awareness that came from operating in environments where complacency was fatal. Her presence suggested depths of experience that weren't immediately apparent from her rank or appearance. The challenge that would test Patel's resolve and reveal her true background came in the form of military bureaucracy colliding with urgent operational necessity. When rigid adherence to manifest protocols threatened to prevent her from reaching a destination where her unique skills and experience were desperately needed, the situation would force her to choose between accepting bureaucratic delays and revealing aspects of her service record that were meant to remain classified. While testing whether the military's informal networks of recognition and respect could overcome official obstacles when lives were at stake, the opportunity for Patel to reach Forward Operating Base Sentinel came through an urgent request from the base's medical officer, who had specifically asked for her assistance with a wounded soldier whose condition required specialized care that went beyond standard combat medicine. The request had come through unofficial channels, bypassing normal assignment procedures, and carried the kind of urgency that suggested lives were at stake. Patel's decision to respond to the request was immediate and non-negotiable, driven by her understanding that when fellow soldiers needed help, bureaucratic obstacles became irrelevant. The mission represented more than just another assignment. It was a chance to use skills and experience that had been developed through years of specialized training and combat operations that most soldiers would never be cleared to know about. The choice to pursue transport to FOB Sentinel also involved accepting significant personal risk, as the base was located in one of Afghanistan's most contested regions where helicopter flights faced constant threat from enemy fire and the kind of sophisticated anti-aircraft weapons that had claimed numerous aircraft over the past months. But Patel's commitment to helping fellow soldiers outweighed any personal safety considerations. Her decision also reflected her understanding that some obligations transcended normal military channels, and that the informal networks of trust and mutual support that connected elite operators often provided the most effective means of accomplishing critical missions. Patel's approach to securing transport was based on her experience with military logistics and her understanding of how to work within and around official procedures to accomplish necessary missions. Her plan involved presenting her orders through normal channels while being prepared to utilize alternative methods if bureaucratic obstacles prevented her from reaching her destination. The strategy required careful balance between following proper procedures and maintaining the operational security that protected both her mission and the classified aspects of her background. Patel understood that revealing too much about her true qualifications could compromise ongoing operations. But she also knew that sometimes recognition of her capabilities was necessary to overcome administrative barriers. Her preparation included reviewing multiple transport options and identifying personnel who might have the authority and inclination to approve emergency passage if standard procedures failed. The plan also involved maintaining cover for the classified nature of her mission, while providing enough information to justify the urgency of her request. The approach reflected Patel's experience in navigating complex military hierarchies and her understanding that successful operations often required flexibility and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining focus on the primary objective. Patel's first attempt to secure passage on the Black Hawk involved presenting her orders to Staff Sergeant Williams, the flight crew chief responsible for manifest management and passenger clearance. Williams, a competent NCO with 5 years of aviation experience, reviewed her paperwork with the methodical attention to detail that characterized professional military operations. "Sergeant, I show you on the standby list, but the manifest is full with priority personnel," Williams explained, his tone professional but firm. "Next available flight is scheduled for 1400 hours tomorrow, assuming weather conditions permit and no higher priority missions take precedence." Patel's response was measured and respectful, reflecting her understanding of military protocol while conveying the urgency of her situation. "Staff Sergeant, I understand the constraints, but this is a medical emergency involving a wounded soldier who specifically requested my assistance. Is there any possibility of finding space on today's flight?" Williams's reply revealed the inflexibility that often characterized military logistics when personnel lacked the authority or inclination to make exceptions. Negative. "Sergeant, regulations are clear about manifest procedures, and I don't have authorization to bump approved passengers for standby requests. You'll need to wait for the next available transport or find alternative arrangements through your chain of command. The first day of Patel's attempt to reach FOB Sentinel revealed the full extent of the bureaucratic obstacles she faced. As multiple personnel cited regulations, security concerns, and manifest priorities that prevented her from securing immediate transport. Her status as a Sergeant First Class, while respectable, didn't carry the weight necessary to override established procedures or convince junior personnel to make exceptions. The morning progressed with a series of polite but firm rejections from various flight operations personnel, each citing different aspects of regulations that prevented them from accommodating her request. The consistency of the refusals suggested that the system was working as designed, prioritizing established procedures over individual urgency. Patel's patience during these interactions was remarkable, reflecting her understanding that antagonizing the personnel she needed help from would only make her situation more difficult. Her approach remained professional and respectful, even as the urgency of her mission increased with each passing hour. The rejections also attracted the attention of other soldiers waiting for transport, some of whom began to question why someone of her rank was so insistent about reaching what they assumed was a routine assignment. Their speculation created additional pressure as Patel worked to maintain operational security while pursuing her mission. The attention that Patel's situation began to attract came from multiple sources, including other soldiers waiting for transport who were curious about her persistence, flight operations personnel who were discussing her case among themselves, and senior NCOs who had noticed the unusual nature of her requests. Sergeant Major Rodriguez, the senior enlisted advisor for aviation operations, became aware of the situation when multiple personnel mentioned the sergeant who was seeking emergency transport to FOB Sentinel. His interest was piqued by the unusual nature of her request and her calm persistence in the face of repeated rejections. Colonel Marcus Hale, who was conducting his routine inspection of flight operations, also took notice when he observed Patel's interaction with the flight crew and heard fragments of conversation about her urgent need to reach the forward base. His attention was drawn by something familiar about her bearing and the way she carried herself, though he couldn't immediately identify what seemed recognizable about her. The growing attention created both opportunities and challenges for Patel, as increased scrutiny could either help her case by bringing it to the attention of personnel with authority to approve her request, or create complications if her classified background became a subject of speculation or investigation. The major breakthrough in Patel's situation came when Colonel Hale's inspection brought him close enough to observe her interaction with the flight crew and notice details about her appearance and equipment that suggested experience beyond what her rank might indicate. His trained eye caught subtle signs that marked her as someone with specialized training and operational experience. Most significantly, Hale's position allowed him to notice a small patch on Patel's sleeve that was partially concealed by her equipment, but visible to someone observing from the right angle. The patch was subdued and unofficial, the kind of unit identifier that was worn by personnel from specialized units whose existence was not widely acknowledged. The discovery of the patch triggered recognition in Hale's memory, as he recalled previous encounters with personnel who wore similar identifiers and the classified operations that had brought them to his attention, his understanding of what the patch represented immediately changed his assessment of Patel's situation and the legitimacy of her urgent transport request. The breakthrough also came when Hale realized that Patel's persistence wasn't based on personal convenience or routine military business, but on operational necessity that was connected to the kind of specialized missions that required immediate response and maximum operational security. As Colonel Hale processed the significance of what he had observed, he prepared to intervene in Patel's situation while maintaining the operational security that protected both her mission and the classified nature of her background. His approach required careful balance between providing necessary assistance and avoiding actions that might compromise sensitive information or operations. The preparation involved Hale's decision to approach Patel directly rather than working through the normal chain of command, recognizing that her situation required the kind of immediate action that could only be provided by someone with sufficient authority and understanding of the operational context. His preparation also included consideration of how to handle the situation in front of other personnel who were observing the interaction, ensuring that his intervention would be seen as appropriate exercise of command authority rather than favoritism or violation of established procedures. The approach required Hale to draw on his own experience with classified operations and specialized units, using his knowledge to provide the kind of recognition and support that Patel needed while protecting the sensitive aspects of her background and mission. The crisis that would determine Patel's fate came when the scheduled departure time for the Black Hawk approached, and she found herself still without confirmed passage. Despite hours of attempting to work through official channels, the flight crew began their final preparations while Patel watched from the side of the landing zone, her options rapidly diminishing as bureaucratic procedures threatened to prevent her from reaching FOB Sentinel in time to help the wounded soldier who had requested her assistance. The situation was complicated by the arrival of several officers who had been approved for transport, filling the remaining seats and apparently eliminating any possibility of finding space for Patel. Staff Sergeant Williams approached her with what appeared to be final confirmation that she would not be flying on this mission. "Sergeant Patel," Williams said with professional sympathy, "I've done everything I can, but the manifest is locked and we're at maximum capacity. You'll have to wait for tomorrow's flight or find alternative transport through your command channels." The rejection represented not just personal disappointment, but potential failure of a mission that could affect the life of a fellow soldier who was depending on her specialized skills and experience. The time-sensitive nature of medical emergencies meant that delays could have consequences that extended far beyond bureaucratic inconvenience. Patel's response to this final rejection would determine whether she accepted defeat or found another way to accomplish her mission, testing her resourcefulness and commitment to the values that had defined her military service. The pivotal moment came when Colonel Hale stepped forward and addressed Staff Sergeant Williams directly, his voice carrying the authority of command and the weight of recognition that changed the entire dynamic of the situation. "Staff Sergeant, I'm authorizing Sergeant Patel's immediate boarding on this flight. Make room." Williams' response reflected both surprise and professional compliance. "Yes, sir, but the manifest is at capacity, and regulations require—" "I understand the regulations." Hale interrupted, his tone making it clear that this was not a discussion, but a direct order. This is a command decision based on operational necessity. Sergeant Patel has priority clearance for this mission. Oh, the colonel's intervention was witnessed by everyone in the immediate area, creating a moment of recognition that Patel's mission was far more significant than anyone had realized. His willingness to override established procedures and personally authorize her transport sent a clear message about her importance and the urgency of her assignment. But the most significant aspect of the moment came when Hale approached Patel directly and spoke in a voice low enough that only she could hear, "I recognize that patch, Sergeant. Shadow Ascent Z09. Mosul Operation. You provided cover for my exfiltration team when everything went sideways. I never forgot." The personal recognition transformed the situation from a bureaucratic override to an acknowledgment of shared experience and mutual respect between warriors who had served together in the most dangerous circumstances. Hale's memory of Patel's actions during a classified operation provided the context that explained both her current mission and his immediate willingness to provide whatever assistance she needed. The turning point was complete when Hale's recognition of Patel's background and his personal intervention ensured that she would reach FOB Sentinel with the urgency that her mission required. His authority as a colonel made his decision final and unchallengeable, while his personal knowledge of her capabilities provided validation that her transport request was based on legitimate operational necessity. "This isn't a favor, Sergeant," Hale said as he escorted her toward the Black Hawk. "This is recognition of service and acknowledgement that when operators like you say something is urgent, people listen. The wounded soldier you're going to help is fortunate to have someone with your skills and experience responding to his needs." The turning point also represented vindication of Patel's persistence and validation of her approach to the situation, demonstrating that sometimes the informal networks of recognition and respect that connected military professionals could overcome bureaucratic obstacles when official channels failed. The transformation from rejected passenger to priority transport illustrated the power of shared experience and mutual recognition among those who had served in the most demanding circumstances, where bonds forged in combat created obligations that transcended normal military hierarchies. The final preparation for Patel's departure involved Colonel Hale ensuring that her transport was not just authorized, but expedited, with instructions to the flight crew that emphasized the priority nature of her mission without revealing classified details about her background or destination objectives. His approach balanced operational security with the need to ensure that Patel received appropriate support for her critical assignment. The preparation also included Hale's brief coordination with FOB Sentinel's command structure, using secure communications to alert them that specialized medical support was en route and should be given whatever resources and assistance were required upon arrival. His intervention ensured that Patel's mission would continue smoothly once she reached her destination. Hale's preparation extended to providing Patel with his personal contact information and authorization codes that would allow her to request additional support if needed during her mission. The gesture reflected both his respect for her capabilities and his understanding that specialized operations often required flexibility, and rapid response to changing circumstances. The final preparation involved Hale's decision to personally brief the flight crew about the importance of Patel's mission, ensuring that she would receive appropriate treatment during transport and that any issues that arose during the flight would be resolved in her favor. Despite Colonel Hale's intervention and authorization, Patel experienced a moment of doubt about whether accepting his assistance might compromise the operational security that protected both her current mission and the classified operations that had brought them together previously. Her concern was not about her own welfare, but about the potential exposure of sensitive information that could affect ongoing operations or endanger other personnel. The doubt was also influenced by her understanding that accepting high-level intervention could create expectations or obligations that might complicate her ability to operate independently in the future. Her preference for working through normal channels reflected her commitment to maintaining the low profile that had characterized her specialized service. But her doubt was quickly resolved by her recognition that the wounded soldier at FOB Sentinel needed her help immediately, and that operational security concerns could not be allowed to prevent her from fulfilling her obligation to provide assistance to a fellow service member who was depending on her skills and experience. The climactic moment began as Patel boarded the Black Hawk under Colonel Hale's direct authorization. The pressure intense as she understood that her mission's success now carried additional weight due to the high-level intervention that had made it possible. The flight crew's professional courtesy reflected their recognition that she was traveling under command authority that made her mission a priority for everyone involved. The pressure was compounded by her awareness that the wounded soldier at FOB Sentinel was depending on her arrival, and that any delays or complications during transport could have serious consequences for someone whose medical condition required immediate attention from someone with her specialized training and experience. The beginning of the flight also marked the transition from bureaucratic obstacles to operational execution, as Patel shifted her focus from securing transport to preparing for the medical emergency that awaited her at the destination. The initial challenges of the flight involved the typical hazards of helicopter transport in a combat zone, including potential enemy fire, mechanical issues, and weather conditions that could complicate the mission or force emergency landings in hostile territory. The flight path to FOB Sentinel required navigation through areas where insurgent activity had been reported, creating additional risks that were managed through careful route planning and constant vigilance. Additional challenges arose from Patel's need to prepare for the medical emergency while dealing with the physical demands of helicopter transport, including noise, vibration, and the confined space that limited her ability to review medical procedures or organize equipment during the flight. The challenges also included maintaining operational security about her mission while traveling with other passengers who might be curious about her urgent transport and the obvious priority that her mission had received from senior command. The critical moment of the mission came when the Black Hawk touched down at FOB Sentinel and Patel immediately transitioned from passenger to medical specialist. Her arrival marking the beginning of intensive efforts to save the life of Staff Sergeant Jamal Malik, whose injuries from an IED blast had overwhelmed the base's normal medical capabilities. Malik's condition required exactly the kind of specialized trauma care that Patel had learned during her classified service with Shadow Ascent, where medical personnel were trained to handle the most severe combat injuries under the most challenging circumstances. Her immediate assessment of his injuries and rapid implementation of advanced treatment procedures demonstrated why her specific skills had been requested. The critical nature of the moment was enhanced by the time pressure involved. As Malik's condition was deteriorating and required immediate intervention that could only be provided by someone with Patel's training and experience, her arrival represented the difference between life and death for a fellow soldier whose survival depended on receiving care that went far beyond standard combat medicine. The success of her initial treatment efforts validated both her decision to pursue the mission and Colonel Hale's intervention to ensure that she could reach FOB Sentinel in time to make a difference. The moment of victory came when Patel's specialized medical intervention stabilized Malik's condition and prepared him for medical evacuation to a facility where he could receive the long-term care necessary for his recovery. Her successful treatment demonstrated the value of her unique training and the importance of having personnel with specialized capabilities available when standard procedures were insufficient. The victory was witnessed by the medical staff at FOB Sentinel, who recognized that they had just observed medical procedures and techniques that exceeded their own training and capabilities. Their appreciation for Patel's intervention was evident in their immediate requests for her to provide additional training and guidance during her stay at the base. The ultimate victory was Malik's survival and successful evacuation, proving that the urgent mission that had seemed impossible just hours earlier had been accomplished through the combination of Patel's specialized skills, Colonel Hale's recognition and intervention, and the military's commitment to supporting its personnel when they needed help most. The immediate impact of Patel's successful mission was the saving of Staff Sergeant Malik's life and his successful medical evacuation to Germany, where he would eventually make a full recovery and return to active duty. The medical procedures she had performed became case studies for advanced combat medicine, though the classified nature of her training meant that the full extent of her capabilities remained known only to those with appropriate clearances. Colonel Hale's intervention on her behalf became an example of how senior leaders could recognize and support specialized personnel whose capabilities might not be immediately apparent to those without appropriate background knowledge. His decision to override bureaucratic procedures when operational necessity demanded it demonstrated the kind of leadership that prioritized mission accomplishment over administrative convenience. The incident also strengthened the informal networks of recognition and mutual support that connected personnel who had served in classified operations, reinforcing the understanding that shared experience in dangerous circumstances created lasting obligations and opportunities for mutual assistance. The long-term impact of Patel's mission extended beyond the immediate medical emergency to influence how the military approached the utilization of personnel with specialized but classified backgrounds. Her case demonstrated the importance of maintaining systems that could recognize and deploy unique capabilities when they were needed, even when normal procedures might not adequately account for such expertise. The success of her intervention also led to discussions about how to better integrate personnel with special operations backgrounds into conventional military units, ensuring that their capabilities could be utilized effectively while maintaining appropriate operational security. Patel's experience became part of the ongoing evolution of military medicine and the recognition that combat medical care required personnel with diverse training and experience. Her story also reinforced the importance of the informal networks and personal relationships that connected military professionals across different units and specialties, demonstrating how these connections could provide critical support when official channels were insufficient. 6 months after her emergency mission to FOB Sentinel, Patel received a letter from Staff Sergeant Malik, who had completed his recovery and returned to duty with his unit. "I don't know what you did or where you learned to do it," he wrote, "but I'm alive because you were willing to fight through bureaucracy and regulations to get to me when I needed help. That's the kind of soldier I want to be." Patel kept the letter in her personal effects, a reminder that the most important victories in military service were often the ones that saved lives rather than the ones that earned recognition. Her patch from Shadow Ascent remained hidden beneath her equipment, a symbol of service that spoke louder through actions than through display, representing the quiet professionals who served in the shadows while making the ultimate difference when it mattered most. The mission had been accomplished, the soldier saved, and the bonds of military brotherhood proven once again to transcend bureaucracy, rank, and regulation when lives were at stake.